Tracking some breaking news just into CNN concerning President Trump's national security advisor, Mike Waltz. Let's get straight to Jeff Zeleny at the White House. So just a few hours ago, Jeff, we learned that Mike Waltz was going to be departing the administration, and now we've learned that he's going to be tapped to fill a role that Trump has yet to since taking office the second time.
Boris, very interesting, and we can headline this under soft landing, if you will. The president just announcing a few moments ago on Truth Social, his social media platform, that he does intend to nominate Mike Waltz to be the next ambassador to the United Nations. Let's read this together here. He said, "I'm pleased to announce that I will be nominating Mike Waltz to be the next U.S. ambassador to the UN. From his time in uniform on the battlefield, in Congress, and as my national security advisor, Mike Waltz has worked hard to put our nation's interests first." The president goes on to say, "I know he will do the same in his new role." Boris, this is very interesting. In the interim, Secretary of State Marco Rubio.
Okay, so here's a story that reveals just how chaotic and dysfunctional Trump's second-term administration has become at the highest levels of national security decision-making, and the implications for American security are genuinely alarming. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz and his deputy Alex Wong abruptly resigned in May 2025 amid the explosive Signalgate scandal, a security breach so embarrassing and potentially dangerous that it forced the first major cabinet-level purge of Trump's second term. Waltz accidentally included a journalist in a top-secret group chat where senior officials were discussing military strikes on Yemen, not an aide who leaked information to the press, not a hacker who broke into government systems. The National Security Advisor himself accidentally added a reporter to an encrypted chat about active military operations. That's the level of competence we're dealing with in this administration's handling of the most sensitive information the government possesses. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us. Be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
Will serve as the national security advisor while continuing his strong leadership at the State Department. So certainly some quick work by the White House, by the president, to move beyond the storyline of a firing, essentially, to shifting the conversation to who is going to replace him. And Boris, my memory at least is, and we will have to check this, but not since Henry Kissinger served as the Secretary of State as well as the National Security Advisor, was that position held by the same person. There may have been someone else since then, since those intervening years from the Nixon administration. However, this is a temporary position for Secretary Rubio, but certainly interesting that Mike Waltz is going to be nominated to be the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. Of course, that was a position that was intended to be held by Elise Stefanik, right, a member of Congress from New York.
Let me walk you through what happened, because the details are genuinely stunning and reveal how badly the Trump administration handles sensitive national security information that American lives depend on remaining secret. The group chat in question was being used by senior officials to coordinate responses to Houthi attacks on shipping in the Red Sea, serious military planning involving potential strikes that could affect American service members and regional stability in one of the world's most critical waterways. Someone, apparently Waltz or someone on his immediate team, accidentally included Jeffrey Goldberg, editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, in this encrypted signal chat where officials were discussing operational military matters. Goldberg, understandably recognizing he was receiving information he absolutely shouldn't have access to, eventually reported on what he's seen. The contents of the chat reportedly included discussions of timing and targeting for Yemen strikes, the kind of operational security information that's supposed to be among the most closely guarded secrets in government. Enemy forces monitor American media and communications, looking for exactly this kind of leak, revealing when strikes will happen, what targets are being considered, who's making the decisions. All of this is intelligence gold for adversaries trying to protect their assets or plan counterattacks against American forces. And it was shared with the journalists because someone made a basic configuration error on an encrypted messaging app. Come on. Think about what this says about how national security is being managed under Trump's second term. The National Security Advisor is supposed to be the president's chief coordinator of foreign policy and military decision-making across the entire government. The NSC staff handles the most sensitive information the United States possesses: intelligence about adversary capabilities, military planning for ongoing and potential operations, diplomatic communications with allies and enemies alike. and they're having these discussions on Signal, adding people to chats without proper verification of who they're including, and accidentally bringing journalists into conversations about active military operations. This isn't sophisticated hacking by foreign intelligence services or brilliant espionage by planted agents. This is basic operational incompetence at the highest level of American national security management. The fallout from Signalgate was swift, but also characteristically Trumpian in its absurdity and refusal to acknowledge real accountability. Waltz was forced out, announced May 1, 2025, but Trump, constitutionally unable to simply acknowledge a failure and make a clean break, nominated Waltz for UN ambassador. The man who just demonstrated he cannot be trusted with secure communications about military operations was nominated for a senior diplomatic position that requires handling sensitive communications with foreign governments. It's like getting fired for crashing the company car into the building and then being offered a position as head of the transportation division. Secretary of State Marco Rubio was named acting national security advisor, while a permanent replacement is identified and confirmed, meaning one person is now attempting to do two of the most demanding and time-consuming jobs in the entire federal government simultaneously. Rubio is supposed to be managing American diplomacy worldwide, traveling to foreign capitals, meeting with heads of state, managing the massive State Department bureaucracy, while also coordinating the interagency national security process that requires constant attention, daily presidential briefings, and deep expertise across military, intelligence, and diplomatic domains. The doubling up is a temporary solution that cannot possibly be sustained, but it reveals how thin the personnel bench has become when people have to be pushed out for cause. The Signalgate scandal connects to a broader pattern of NSC dysfunction under Trump's second term that extends well beyond this single incident. Before Waltz's resignation, there had been staff firings following what reports describe as a loyalty meeting involving Laura Loomer, the far-right conspiracy theorist and provocateur who has somehow become influential in Trump's inner circle. Former State Department spokesperson Ned Price characterized the situation as fringe conspiracies having direct influence over national security staffing decisions. The professional national security community that has served presidents of both parties for decades is being systematically replaced by loyalists whose primary qualification is personal devotion to Trump rather than expertise in foreign policy, military affairs, or intelligence analysis. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's role in the Signalgate fiasco has continued to draw scrutiny as well, adding to the concerns about his fitness for the position. Hegseth was reportedly a participant in the compromised chat and faces ongoing questions about his own handling of the situation and whether he bears responsibility for the security practices that led to the breach. This comes on top of the Venezuela boat strike controversy we've covered extensively, where Hegseth and Trump have been contradicting each other about who authorized what in the double tap strike, and where the administration's military decision-making has been called into serious question by members of Congress and military legal experts. The pattern is consistent across multiple incidents, defense and national security decisions being made by people who don't seem to know what they're doing or how to handle the responsibilities of their positions. The resignation of Waltz and Wong marks the first major high-profile cabinet-level purge of Trump's second term, but it almost certainly won't be the last, given the pattern of chaos, scandal, and dysfunction that characterizes this administration at every level. When your national security advisor has to resign because he accidentally shared classified information with a journalist through basic operational carelessness, that's not an isolated incident that can be attributed to one person having a bad day. It's a symptom of systemic dysfunction in how the administration handles the most sensitive aspects of governing, dysfunction that will produce more failures as long as the underlying causes remain unaddressed. So in this video, we're going to break down exactly what happened with Signalgate and why it represents such a serious breach of operational security that affects real American lives. We're going to look at the broader pattern of NSC dysfunction, including the loyalty purges and the Laura Loomer influence on staffing. We're going to examine what Rubio's impossible dual role means for national security coordination. And we're going to discuss how this cabinet implosion connects to everything else going wrong for Trump's administration, as scandals pile on scandals. Let's get into it. All right, let's get into the specific details of the Signalgate scandal and what it reveals about national security decision-making in Trump's second term, because the implications extend far beyond one embarrassing incident to fundamental questions about whether this administration can be trusted with American security. The use of Signal for sensitive government communications itself represents a significant departure from standard security protocols that exist for very good reasons. Government agencies have secure communication systems specifically designed to handle classified information systems that are regularly audited by security professionals, that have proper access controls preventing unauthorized additions, and that can't be compromised by someone accidentally adding the wrong contact from their phone. Signal is an encrypted messaging app designed for private communications between individuals. but it's not designed for government secrets and lacks the institutional controls that classified systems require. Using Signal for discussions of active military operations represents a workaround that trades security for convenience, a trade that should never be made with information that could cost American lives if compromised. The fact that senior officials were comfortable conducting Yemen strike planning on Signal suggests this wasn't an isolated incident or a one-time lapse in judgment. People don't suddenly start using a consumer app for the most sensitive conversations in government. They develop patterns of behavior over time that become normalized. The comfort level with conducting operational military planning on Signal indicates this was probably a regular practice, meaning the Goldberg inclusion was just the instance that got exposed. There may have been other security breaches from this practice that never became public because no journalist was involved to report them. The specific contents reportedly shared in the chat included discussions of timing and targeting for strikes against Houthi forces in Yemen, exactly the kind of operational information that adversaries desperately want and that American personnel depend on remaining secret. The Houthis, backed by Iran with intelligence support and military equipment, have been attacking commercial shipping in the Red Sea as part of their response to the Gaza conflict. U.S. forces have conducted strikes against Houthi positions to protect shipping lanes and respond to attacks on American interests in the region. The timing and targeting of these strikes is exactly the kind of operational information that adversaries can use to protect their assets, prepare defenses, and endanger American forces conducting the operations. When strike timing is revealed to adversaries, they can disperse assets from known locations, relocate personnel to avoid casualties, and prepare air defense systems to intercept incoming aircraft or missiles. When targeting information is revealed, high-value targets can be moved, and decoys can be deployed to waste American ordnance and intelligence resources. The information in that chat wasn't just embarrassing to the administration politically, it was potentially dangerous to American service members who conduct these operations and depend on operational security for their safety and mission success. Jeffrey Goldberg, the Atlantic editor who received the chat messages, faced his own ethical and legal dilemma upon realizing what he'd been included in. As a journalist, he had access to newsworthy information about government operations that the public might have legitimate interest in knowing about. As a responsible actor, aware of national security implications, he understood that publishing operational details could endanger lives and compromise ongoing military operations. His eventual reporting focused on the fact of the breach and the dysfunction it revealed rather than specific operational details, but the fact that a journalist had this choice to make at all, that this information was in his hands because of government incompetence, reflects how badly the system had failed at the most basic level. Waltz's resignation on May 1, 2025, was announced with the typical Trump-era spin that attempts to make forced departures look like voluntary transitions to new opportunities. Trump's True Social post praised Waltz for having worked hard and expressed confidence he would do the same as UN ambassador. The nomination to the UN position was presumably designed to make the departure look like a lateral move or even a promotion rather than a firing for cause following a serious security breach. But nobody in Washington was fooled by the spin. You don't leave the national security advisor position suddenly amid a scandal because you're eager for a different challenge or because the president has exciting new plans for your career. The nomination of Waltz to be UN ambassador after his security failure raises serious questions about accountability in this administration and the message it sends to other officials. The UN ambassador position requires Senate confirmation and involves handling sensitive diplomatic communications with representatives of every nation on earth, including adversaries who would love to exploit security weaknesses. Nominating someone who just demonstrated inability to manage secure communications for a position that requires exactly that capability is characteristic of Trump's approach throughout his political career. Loyalty matters more than competence, and failures will be rewarded rather than punished as long as the person remained personally loyal to Trump. Alex Wong's departure, alongside Waltz, suggests the problem extended beyond one person making one careless mistake. Wong was Waltz's deputy, the number 2 official in the National Security Council structure, and his simultaneous resignation indicates either shared responsibility for the security practices that led to the breach or a recognition that the entire NSA operation was compromised and needed wholesale change. Losing both the principal and deputy simultaneously represents a significant disruption to national security coordination during an already chaotic period when the administration is dealing with multiple foreign policy crises. Marco Rubio's assignment as acting national security advisor while maintaining his role as Secretary of State creates an impossible workload that cannot be sustained for any significant period. The Secretary of State manages American diplomacy worldwide, traveling constantly to foreign capitals, meeting with foreign leaders and ministers, testifying before Congress, managing the massive State Department bureaucracy with its embassies and consulates around the globe. The National Security Advisor coordinates the interagency process, bringing together state, defense, intelligence, treasury, and other agencies briefs the president daily on threats and opportunities, and manages the NSC staff that supports presidential decision-making. These are both more than full-time jobs that require dedicated attention from highly capable individuals. Having one person try to do both means neither gets the focus and attention required for effective performance. The arrangement reveals how thin Trump's personnel bench has become after the loyalty purges and departures for cause. After systematically removing or driving out experienced professionals who weren't sufficiently devoted to Trump personally, and after losing people like Waltz to scandals of their own making, there apparently wasn't anyone available to step into the NSA role on even a temporary basis without pulling someone from another critical position. The same pattern of prioritizing loyalty over competence that led to the Signalgate breach in the first place has left the administration without adequate personnel to manage the crisis that incompetence created. The Laura-Loomer connection to NSC dysfunction represents another deeply troubling dimension of the problem that goes beyond normal political staffing disputes. Loomer is a far-right provocateur known for conspiracy theories, extremist positions, and inflammatory rhetoric who has somehow gained significant influence in Trump's inner circle during his second term. Reports indicate that NSC staff were dismissed following a loyalty meeting that involved Loomer's assessment of who was sufficiently devoted to Trump to be trusted in sensitive positions. Professional national security experts who have served the country for years being fired based on the judgment of a conspiracy theorist is dysfunction that goes far beyond normal political staffing decisions into territory that genuinely threatens national security. Former State Department spokesperson Ned Price's characterization of fringe conspiracists influencing national security staffing captures the fundamental problem. The national security apparatus requires genuine expertise, understanding of foreign governments and their decision-making, military capabilities and limitations, intelligence analysis methodologies, diplomatic tradecraft developed over careers. These are skills developed through years of study and experience that cannot be replaced by political loyalty. Replacing career experts with loyalists whose primary qualification is personal devotion to Trump rather than professional capability guarantees the kind of failures that Signalgate represents. The Hegseth connection adds another layer of concern about defense and military leadership. The defense secretary was reportedly a participant in the compromised chat and faces ongoing scrutiny for his role in the affair and whether he bears responsibility for inadequate security practices. This comes on top of the Venezuela boat strike controversy, where Hegseth and Trump have been contradicting each other about who authorized the double-tap strike on survivors and where the administration's military decision-making has been questioned by Congress and legal experts. The pattern across multiple incidents suggests defense and military decisions at the highest level are being handled by people who lack the competence or judgment their positions require. The timing of the Signalgate exposure, coming amid the Yemen campaign, ongoing Iran tensions, and other foreign policy challenges requiring careful management, meant the administration was dealing with a major personnel crisis exactly when it needed stable national security leadership. International adversaries watch American political news closely and adjust their behavior based on perceived American weakness, distraction, or dysfunction. A publicly exposed security breach, followed by forced resignations at the highest levels, signals dysfunction that adversaries in Beijing, Moscow, Tehran, and Pyongyang may seek to exploit through more aggressive action, while America appears distracted. Okay, so let's break this down into the key points that everyone needs to understand, because this cabinet implosion reveals fundamental problems with how Trump's administration handles national security that have implications far beyond one embarrassing incident and will affect American security for years to come. Point number one, the National Security Advisor accidentally included a journalist in a top-secret group chat discussing active military operations against Yemen, exposing timing and targeting information that could endanger American personnel and compromise operational effectiveness against adversaries who monitor American media for exactly this kind of intelligence. This is basic operational security failure at the highest level of government, not a sophisticated attack, but simple incompetence. Point number two, the use of Signal for classified discussions represents a systematic practice of prioritizing convenience over security, suggesting this breach was just the exposed instance of a broader pattern rather than an isolated mistake, and raising serious questions about what other sensitive information may have been compromised through similar practices that weren't accidentally shared with journalists. Point number three, Waltz's nomination to UN ambassador after being forced out for the security breach exemplifies the administration's approach of rewarding loyalty over competence, putting someone who demonstrated clear inability to manage secure communications in a position requiring exactly that capability for handling sensitive diplomatic matters. Point number four, Rubio's dual role as both Secretary of State and acting National Security Advisor reveals how thin the personnel bench has become after loyalty purges systematically removed experienced professionals, with one person now trying to do two impossible full-time jobs because there's no one else available who meets Trump's loyalty requirements. Point number 5, the Laura Loomer influence on NSC staffing decisions, with professional experts reportedly fired based on her assessment of their loyalty to Trump, represents the replacement of competence with devotion as the primary qualification for national security positions, guaranteeing more failures like Signalgate. The operational security implications of Signalgate deserve extended emphasis because they affect real people in genuinely dangerous situations who depend on secrecy for their lives. When military personnel conduct strikes against adversary positions, they depend on operational security, the enemy not knowing when and where strikes will occur, for their personal safety, pilots flying missions over hostile territory, special operators conducting raids on the ground, sailors on ships in contested waters. All of them are at significantly greater risk when adversaries know what's coming and can prepare accordingly. The Houthi forces that U.S. strikes target have access to Iranian intelligence support, sophisticated early warning capabilities, and air defense systems that can threaten American aircraft. When strike timing is compromised, they can disperse mobile missile launchers from known locations, relocate personnel from buildings identified as targets, and prepare air defense systems to engage incoming aircraft. American pilots flying into that environment face meaningfully greater risk because the enemy has advance warning they're coming. That's the real-world consequence of a national security advisor who can't manage basic communication security, not just political embarrassment, but increased danger to American lives. The systemic nature of the problem, using Signal routinely for classified discussions rather than as a one-time expedient, suggests the breach risk extends well beyond this single incident. Every conversation conducted on that platform, using inadequate access controls, every chat group created without proper verification of participants, every discussion of sensitive matters on systems not designed for them, represents potential compromise. The Goldberg inclusion got exposed because he's a journalist who eventually reported it. How many other unauthorized recipients might have been added to similar chats without anyone ever knowing or reporting the breach? The waltz to UN nomination perfectly encapsulates the dysfunction of Trump's personnel management and the perverse incentives it creates. In a normal administration with functional accountability, someone forced out for a serious security breach would face real consequences: termination without a soft landing, potential loss of security clearance, exclusion from sensitive positions for the foreseeable future. In Trump's administration, the same person gets nominated for another senior diplomatic position as a reward for loyalty and to spend the departure as a positive career transition rather than a firing for cause. The message this sends to other officials is unmistakable. Loyalty to Trump personally matters infinitely more than job performance, and failures will be excused or even rewarded as long as personal devotion is maintained. The Rubio doubling reveals a personnel desperation that directly affects policy execution and American interests. When the Secretary of State has to simultaneously serve as acting national security advisor, neither role can possibly get adequate attention. Rubio can't travel to important diplomatic meetings in foreign capitals if he's needed for NSC coordination functions in Washington. He can't focus on managing the interagency process if he's dealing with State Department crises. He can't brief the president adequately on intelligence matters if he's preparing for Senate testimony on diplomatic issues. The arrangement is a temporary patch that cannot be sustained, but it reveals the fundamental problem that there's no one else available who Trump trusts enough to put in the NSA role, even temporarily. The loyalty purges that created this personnel shortage are themselves a major story with long-term consequences. Reports of NSC staff being dismissed following Laura Loomer's assessment of their devotion to Trump personally suggest national security staffing decisions are being made based on ideological purity and personal loyalty rather than professional qualification and expertise. Career professionals who have spent decades developing deep expertise in foreign policy, intelligence analysis, military affairs, and regional specializations are being systematically replaced by loyalists whose primary credential is personal fealty to Trump. That's a recipe for exactly the kind of failure Signalgate represents, and the personnel losses will take years to rebuild. The connection to the boat strike controversy shows this isn't an isolated instance of dysfunction, but rather a pattern across the national security apparatus. Higgs's involvement in Signalgate comes on top of the Venezuela situation, where he and Trump have been publicly contradicting each other about who authorized what in the double-tap strike on survivors, and where the administration's military decision-making has been questioned by Congress and legal experts concerned about potential violations of the laws of armed conflict. The pattern across multiple serious incidents suggests defense and military decisions at the highest levels are being handled by people who lack the competence, judgment, or professionalism their positions demand. For adversaries watching American governance, Signalgate provides intelligence gold beyond the specific operational information that was leaked in the chat itself. It reveals that American communication security is compromised at the highest levels by basic incompetence. It shows that political loyalty has definitively replaced professional competence in national security positions. It demonstrates that consequences for even serious failures are minimal as long as personal devotion to Trump is maintained. Every intelligence service in the world, in Moscow, Beijing, Tehran, Pyongyang, is now operating with the reasonable assumption that American secure communications may not be secure and that American national security leadership may not be competent. The impeachment connection is direct because abuse of power and dysfunction charges in the pending resolutions encompass exactly this kind of systematic failure. When the National Security Advisor can't manage basic communication security, when the defense secretary is implicated in potential violations of the laws of armed conflict, when personnel decisions are made by conspiracy theorists rather than professionals, when loyalty to one person replaces competence as the primary qualification, that's the pattern of dangerous misgovernance that impeachment exists to address. Signalgate provides another specific documented example supporting the general charges of administration incompetence and unfitness. The 2026 implications center on the competence argument that Democrats can make with concrete evidence. Trump ran on being a strong leader who would hire the best people and run government more effectively than career politicians. Signalgate demonstrates the precise opposite. His people can't manage basic security. His administration cycles through personnel because of scandals and loyalty purges, and his national security apparatus is invisible chaos. He can't even keep secret. Secret is a devastating and easily understood political message that resonates with voters who care about national security, regardless of their partisan leanings. Looking at the pattern across Trump's second term, the personnel dysfunction is consistent across agencies and worsening over time. Justice Department resignations as career officials refuse to implement policies they consider unlawful. NSC purges based on loyalty assessments by conspiracy theorists. Cabinet members forced out for scandals and immediately nominated for other positions to maintain their loyalty. The administration is hemorrhaging competent people while promoting loyalists whose primary qualification is personal devotion to Trump rather than ability to do their jobs. That's a trajectory that leads to more signal gates, more boat strike controversies, more basic failures of governance. The message to current government employees is corrosive and will have lasting effects on the civil service. If you raise concerns about problematic security practices, you might be purged for insufficient loyalty. If you go along with practices you know are dangerous, you might end up implicated in the next scandal. The incentive structure that Trump has created encourages silence about problems until they explode publicly. Exactly the wrong approach for organizations that depend on people identifying and addressing issues before they become crises. Anyway, that's where things stand with this cabinet implosion, triggered by the Signalgate scandal that exposed fundamental dysfunction in how Trump's administration handles national security at every level. The accidental inclusion of a journalist in top-secret military planning chats through basic carelessness, the systematic use of unsecured communications for classified discussions, the nomination of the person responsible for a new senior position as reward for loyalty, the personnel desperation, forcing one person to do two impossible full-time jobs, and the loyalty purges, replacing competence with devotion throughout the national security apparatus. Make sure you're subscribed because the dysfunction we've covered here connects directly to everything else going wrong in Trump's administration. The boat strike controversy, the pardon scandals, the impeachment push, the health concerns, the Republican infighting, and speaker chaos. Each piece of chaos reinforces the others in creating an administration that cannot function effectively, even on matters of basic national security that American lives depend on. And if Signalgate represents how they handle sensitive military planning, just imagine what other failures are happening throughout this administration that haven't been accidentally shared with journalists yet. I'll see you in the next one.